Hello, Flexus. Indeed, IKEA furniture is fucking hard. Hey, share my secrets with everyone. How are you doing, my friend, on this fine Sunday, by the way? What did you buy, Flexus, that's so hard to assemble? I am curious. I am honestly curious. One particular step of assembly, like 10 times. I took forward to assemble 2 kitchen tables. And technically, it's not complete yet, and I have to assemble one more tomorrow when tabletop for it arrives. Oh boy. Kitchen tables. Actually, disabling that as well. Disabling that. Holy shit, 9.5 hours. That truly is forever. Holy fuck. Disable this as well. We don't want alerts in the middle of everything. Right? Hello, hello, hello. This is me. Cozy little me on this Sunday afternoon, evening, whatever the fuck you would like to call it. Actually, shilling here and there. Will come to join us in this chill Sunday evening, then they come. If they don't, then they don't. So today's tea is red velvet tea. It's a flavored fruit tea, and says is our flamboyant take on the classic cupcake with a nutty twist and a frosting finish. It is really nice. It smells this. Yeah, this is YouTube. The video is from YouTube indeed. Like, this thing smells disgusting, but it tastes amazing. And it's just so weird on that note. Where am I? Yeah. I'm putting myself back here. You are 100% right. This is freaking YouTube. We are chilling to a YouTube video of fireplace. I could have got Netflix as well, but this was easier. Hello, Milk, how are you doing? Plus, this is a 10-hour video, so it's the same video that's been going on the previous 3 book clubs as well. How is your Sunday going, Milk? Nice, good to hear, good to hear. I was playing D and... I am doing well. We were playing D&D earlier. My character died, so I can now bring in my next character. Yeah, I've seen you. Which one is better, this one or this one, by the way? I think this one might be a bit better for things and stuff, and I will just... No, Fluxus, I'm not gonna just steal it. I usually put the link to this video and my video description as well, because I'm not a grabby little bastard. Yeah, my character died, so now I have a chance to make a new character. As much as I love to play Kiva, she's neutral evil, and she's a fucking bastard and coward. So it's gonna be nice to play a warrior for a change. Also spells are the bane of my existence, and no one's gonna convince me otherwise. Especially when you have to prepare them, because you're not a spontaneous caster. It's bad. Yeah. Not real Oni, by the way. What do you mean? Oh, come on, Flexus. Real Oni is what you consider real. Only one true Oni. Also, my team fuser is a little shark, which I cannot really show off right now. Little shark. It's cute as fuck. So, shall we start with the first short story for tonight? I haven't done it in like 2 weeks, so... Think up loud. Yay. So we're still at Neil Gaiman's Smoke and Mirrors. There's a shark in my tea. Yeah, I know. It's shark flavored. The tea, I mean. So, yeah. Today's first short story's title is Changes. I think they are numbered as well, the little bits in the story, so that's gonna be nice. So 1. Later, they would point to his sister's death, the cancer that ate her 12-year-old life, tumors the size of duck eggs in her brain, and him, the boy of 7, snot-nosed and crew-cut, watching her die in the white hospital with his wide brown eyes. And they would say, that was the start of it all. And perhaps it was. In Reboot, directed by Robert Zemeckis, 2018, the biopic, they jump cut to his teens and he's watching his science teacher die of AIDS, following their argument over dissecting a large, pale stomach frog. Why should we take it apart? Says the young Rajit, as the music swells. Instead, should we not give it life? His teacher, played by the late James Earl Jones, looks shamed and then inspired, and he lifts his hand from his hospital bed to the boy's bony shoulder. Well, if anyone can do it, Rajit, you can, he says in a deep bass rumble. The boy nods and stares at us with a dedication in his eyes that borders upon fanaticism. This never happened. It is a grey November day, and Rajit is now a tall man in his 40s, with dark-rimmed spectacles, which he is not currently wearing. The lack of spectacles emphasizes his nudity. He is sitting in the bath as the water gets cold, practicing the conclusion to his speech. He stoops a little in everyday life, although he is not stooping now, and he considers his words before he speaks. He is not a good public speaker. The apartment in Brooklyn, which he shares with another research scientist and a librarian, is empty today. His penis is shrunken and nut-like in the tepid water. What this means, he says loudly and slowly, is that the war against cancer has been won. Then he pauses, takes a question from an imaginary reporter on the other side of the bathroom. Side effects? He replies to himself in an echoing bathroom voice. Yes, there are some side effects, but as far as we have been able to ascertain, nothing that will create any permanent changes. He climbs out of the battered porcelain bathtub and walks, naked, to the toilet bowl, into which he throws up violently, the stage fright pushing through him like a gutting knife. And there is nothing more to throw up, and the dry heaves have subsided. Rajit rinses his mouth with Listerine, gets dressed, and takes the subway into central Manhattan. Hello, Providence. 3. It is, as Time magazine will point out, a discovery that would change the nature of medicine every bit as fundamentally and as importantly as the discovery of penicillin. What if, says Jeff Goldblum, playing the adult Regis in the biopic, just what if you could reset the body's genetic code? So many ills come because the body has forgotten what it should be doing. The code has become scrambled. The program has become corrupted. What if you could fix it? You are crazy, retorts his lovely blonde girlfriend in the movie. In real life, he has no girlfriend. In real life, Rajit's sex life is a fitful series of commercial transactions between Rajit and the young man of the AAA Ajax escort agency. Hey, says Jeff Goldblum, putting it better than Rajit ever did. It's like a computer. Instead of trying to fix the glitches caused by a corrupted program one by one, symptom by symptom, you can just reinstall the program. All the information's there all along. We just have to tell our bodies to go and recheck the RNA and the DNA, reread the program if you will, and then reboot. The blonde actress smiles and stops his words with a kiss, amused and impressed and passionate. Or, woman has cancer of the spleen and of the lymph nodes and the abdomen, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She also has pneumonia. She has agreed to Regit's request to use an experimental treatment on her. She also knows that claiming to cure cancer is illegal in America. She was a fat woman until recently. The weight has fallen from her, and she reminds Regit of a snowman in the sun. Each day she melts, each day she is, he feels, less defined. It is not a drug, as you understand it, he tells her. It is a set of chemical instructions. She looks blank. He injects 2 ampules of a clear liquid into her veins. Soon she sleeps. When she awakes, she is free of cancer. The pneumonia kills her soon after that. Bridget has spent the 2 days before her death wondering how he will explain the fact that, as the autopsy demonstrates beyond a doubt, the patient now has a penis and is, in every respect, functionally and chromosomally male. 5. It is 20 years later in a tiny apartment in New Orleans, although it might as well be in Moscow or Manchester or Paris or Berlin. Tonight is going to be a big night, and Joe is going to stun. That's written in a weird way. Choice is between a Polonaise, crinoline-style 18th century French court dress, fiberglass bustle, underwire décolletage, setting off laced embroidered crimson bodice, and the reproduction of Sir Philip Sidney's court dress in black velvet and silver thread, complete with ruff and codpiece. Eventually, and after weighing all the options, Joe plumps for cleavage over cock. 12 hours to go. Joe opens the bottle with the red pills, each little red pill marked with an X, and pops 2 of them. It's 10 a.m. and Joe goes to bed, begins to masturbate, penis semi-hard, but falls asleep before coming. The room is very small. Clothes hang from every surface. An empty pizza box sits on the floor. Joe snores loudly, normally, but when freebooting, Joe makes no sound at all and might as well be in some kind of coma. Joe wakes at 10 p.m., feeling tender and new. Back when Joe first started on the party scene, each change would prompt a severe self-examination, peering at moles and nipples, foreskin or clit, finding which scars had vanished and which ones had remained. But Joe's now an old hand at this and puts on the bustle, the petticoat, the bodice and the gown. New breast, high and conical, pushed together, petticoat trailing the floor, which means Joe can wear the 40-year-old pair of Dr. Martens boots underneath. You never know when you will need to run, or to walk, or to kick, and silk slippers do no one any favors. High, powder look wig completes the look, and the spray of cologne. Then Joe's hand fumbles at the petticoat, a finger pushes between the legs. Joe wears no knickers, claiming a desire for authenticity, which Doc Martens give the lie, and then dabs it behind the ears for luck, perhaps, or to help pull. Taxi rings the door at 11 05, and Joe goes downstairs. Joe goes to the ball. Tomorrow night, Joe will take another dose. Joe's job identity during the week is strictly male. 4. Well, 6 actually. What the fuck? Okay, I didn't actually skip a page. That's good. 6. Brigitte never viewed the gender rewriting action of Reboot as anything more than a side effect. The Nobel Prize was for anti-cancer work. Rebooting worked for most cancers, it was discovered, but not all of them. For a clever man, Brigitte was remarkably short-sighted. There were a few things he failed to foresee. For example, that there would be people who, dying of cancer, would rather die than experience a change in gender. That the Catholic Church would come out against Brigitte's chemical trigger, marketed by this point under the brand name Reboot, chiefly because the gender change caused the female body to reabsorb into itself the flesh of a fetus as it rebooted itself. Males cannot be pregnant. A number of other religious sects would come out against Reboot, most of them citing Genesis 1:27, male and female created, he them, as their reason. Sects that came out against Reboot included Islam, Christian Science, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Roman Catholic Church, with a number of dissenting voices, the Unification Church, the Orthodox Trek fandom, Orthodox Judaism, the Fundamentalist Alliance of the USA. Sects that came out in favor of Reboot use were deemed the appropriate treatment by a qualified medical doctor included most Buddhists, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Greek Orthodox Church, the Church of Scientology, the Anglican Church, with a number of dissenting voices, New Trek fandom, liberal and Reform Judaism, the New Age Coalition of America. Sects that initially came out in favor of using Reboot reactionally, none. While Brigitte realized that Reboot would make gender reassignment surgery obsolete, it never occurred to him that anyone might wish to take it for reasons of desire or curiosity or escape. Thus he never foresaw the black market in Reboot and similar chemical triggers, nor that, within 15 years of Reboot's commercial release and FDA approval, illegal sales of the designer Reboot knockoffs, bootlegs as they were soon known, would outsell heroin and cocaine, gram for gram, more than 10 times over. 7. In several of the new communist states of Eastern Europe, possession of bootlegs carried a mandatory death sentence. In Thailand and Mongolia, it was reported that boys were being forcibly rebooted into girls to increase their worth as prostitutes. In China, newborn girls were rebooted to boys. Families would save all they had for a single dose. The old people died of cancer as before. The subsequent birth rate crisis was not perceived as a problem until it was too late. The proposed drastic solution provided difficult and led, in their own way, to the final revolution. Amnesty International reported that in several of the Pan-Arabic countries, men who could not easily demonstrate that they had been born male and were not, in fact, women escaping the well, were being imprisoned and in many cases raped and killed. Most Arab leaders denied that either phenomenon was occurring or had ever occurred. 8. Brigitte is in his 60s when he reads the New Yorker that the world change is gathering to itself connotations of deep indecency and taboo. School children giggle embarrassedly when they encounter phrases like I need a change, or time for change, or the winds of change in their studies of pre-21st century literature. In an English class in Norwich, horrified smutty sniggers, there's an S, read a 14-year-old's discovery of a change is as good as a rest. A representative of the King's English Society writes a letter to the Times deploring the loss of another perfectly good word to the English language. I know, Malk. Yeah. Several years later, a youth in Streatham is successfully prosecuted for publicly wearing a t-shirt with the slogan, I'm a changed man, printed clearly upon it. Yeah, it's not that word. There is literally an S there. Oh shit, I forgot to put myself on Do Not Disturb on on Steam. Yeah. Okay, give me 2 seconds because my headset is actually dying. So knocking over my tea. I am well prepared as always. There we go. Still too hot. 9. Jackie works in Blossoms, a nightclub in West Hollywood. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of Jackies in Los Angeles. Thousands of them across the country, hundreds of thousands across the world. Some of them work for the government, some for religious organizations or for businesses. New York, London, and Los Angeles, people like Jackie are on the door at the places that in crowds go. This is what Jackie does. Jackie watches the crowd coming in and thinks, born M, now F, born F, now M, born M, now M, born M, now F, born F, now F. On natural nights, crudely unchanged, Jackie says, I'm sorry you can't come in tonight, a lot. People like Jackie have a 97% accuracy rate. An article in Scientific American suggests that birth gender recognition skills might be genetically inherited, an ability that always existed but had no strict survival values until now. Jackie is ambushed in the small hours of the morning after the back of the Blossoms parking lot. As each new boot crashes or thuds into Jackie's face and chest and head and groin, Jackie thinks, born M, now F, born F, now F, now M, born M, now M. And Jackie gets out of the hospital, vision in one eye only, face and chest, a single huge purple-green bruise. There is a message, sent with an enormous bunch of exotic flowers to say that Jackie's job is still open. However, Jackie takes the bullet train to Chicago, and from there takes a slow train to Kansas City, and stays there, working as a house painter and electrician, professions for which Jackie had trained a long time ago, and does not go back. 10. Brigitte is now in his 70s. Lives in Rio de Janeiro. He is rich enough to satisfy any whim. He will, however, no longer have sex with anyone. He eyes them all distrustfully from his apartment's window, staring down at the bronze bodies on the Copacabana, wondering. People on the beach think no more of him than a teenager with chlamydia gifts thanks to Alexander Fleming. Most of them imagine that Brigitte must be dead by now. None of them care either way. It is suggested that certain cancers have evolved or mutated to survive rebooting. Many bacterial and viral diseases can survive rebooting. A handful even thrive upon rebooting, and one, a strain of gonorrhea, is hypothesized to use the process in its vectoring, initially remaining dormant in the host body and becoming infectious only when the genitalia have reorganized into that of the opposite gender. Still, the average Western human lifespan is increasing. Why some freebooters, recreational reboot users, appear to age normally, while others give no indication of aging at all, is something that puzzles scientists. Some claim that the latter group is actually aging on a cellular level. Others maintain that it is too soon to tell and that no one knows anything for certain. Rebooting does not reverse the aging process, however, there is evidence that, for some, it may arrest it. Many of the older generation who have until now been resistant to rebooting for begin to take it regularly, rebooting, whether they have a medical condition that warrants it or no. Hey Lambda, how are you doing? 11. This coin become known as coinage or occasionally specie. The process of making different or altering is now usually known as shifting. Brigitte is dying of prostate cancer, reoperant. He is in his early 90s. He has never taken reboot. The idea now terrifies him. Cancer has spread to the bones of his pelvis and to his testes. He rings the bell. There is a short wait for the nurse's daily soap opera to be turned off, the cup of coffee put down. Eventually, his nurse comes in. "Me out into the air," he says to the nurse, his voice hoarse. At first, the nurse affects not to understand him. He repeats it in his rough Portuguese. A shake of the head from his nurse. Pulls himself out of the bed, a shrunken figure who stoops so badly as to be almost hunchbacked, and so frail that it seems that a storm would blow him over. To walk toward the door of the apartment. Tries and fails to dissuade him. And then the nurse walks with him to the apartment hall and holds his arm as they wait for the elevator. He has not left the apartment in 2 years. Even before the cancer, Reggie did not leave the apartment. He was almost blind. Him out into the blazing sun, across the road and down onto the sand of the Copacabana. The people on the beach stare at the old man, bald and rotten, in his antique pyjamas, gazing about him with colorless, once brown eyes through bottle-thick dark-rimmed spectacles. He stares back at them. They are golden and beautiful. Some of them are asleep on the sand. Most of them are naked, or they wear the kind of bathing attire that emphasizes and punctuates their nakedness. Bridget knows them, then. Later, they made another biopic. The final sequence, the old man falls to his knees on the beach, as he did in real life, and blood trickles from the open flap of his pyjama bottom, soaking the faded cotton and puddling darkly onto the soft sand. He stares at them all, looking from one to another with awe upon his face, like a man who has finally learned how to stare at the sun. He said one word only as he died. Surrounded by the golden people, who were not men, who were not women. He said, "Angel." People watching the biopic, as golden, as beautiful, as changed as the people on the beach, knew that that was the end of it all. Any way that Rajit would have understood, it was. Indeed, an interesting short story. It's one of the things. Imagine not taking medication for cancer that has proven to be working because you are transphobic. Yeah. Next one. Nope. Well, what as fuck. So the next short story is The Daughter of Owls. The Remains of Gentilism and Judaism by John Aubrey, RSS, 1686 to 87, pages 262 to 260. I had this story from my friend Edmund Wald, Esquire, who had it from Mr. Farrington, who said it was old in his time. The town of Dimpton, a newly born girl was left one night on the steps of the church, where the sexton found her there the next morning, and she had hold of a curious thing. With by pellet of an owl, which when crumbled showed the usual composition of a hoot owl's pellet, thus skin and teeth and small bones. The old wives of the town stated as follows: that the girl was the daughter of owls, and that she would be burnt to death, for she was not born of women. Notwithstanding, wiser heads and grey beards prevailed, and the babe was taken to the convent. For this was shortly after the Papish times, and the convent had been left empty, for the townfolk thought it was a place of divils and such. And hoot owls and screech owls and many bats did make their home in the tower. There she left. One of the wives of the town each day went to the convent and fed the babe. and see. Oh, okay. It was prognosticated that the babe would die, but she did not do. Instead, she grew year on and about until she was a maid of 14 summers. She was the prettiest thing you ever did see. A fine young lass who spent her days and nights behind high stone walls with no one never to see but a town wife who came every morn. One market day the good wife talked too loudly of the girl's prettiness, and also that she could not speak, for she had never learned the manner of it. The man of Dimpton, the grey beards, and the young man spoke together, saying, "If we were to visit her, who would know," meaning by visit, that they did intend to ravish her. It was put about thus, that ye menfolk would go a hunting all in a company, when the moon would be full, which it being, they crept one by one from their houses, and met outside the convent, and the reeve of Diamond unlocked the gate, and one by one they went in. They found her hiding in the cellar, being startled by a noise. The maid was more pretty even than they had heard. Her hair was red, which was uncommon, and she wore but a white shift, and when she saw them she was much afraid, for she had never seen no men before, save only the women who brought her victuals, and she stared at them with huge eyes, and she uttered small cries, as if she were imploring them not to hurt her. The townsfolk merely laughed, for they meant mischief, and were wicked cruel men, and they came at her in the moon's light. Then the girl began a screeching and wailing, but that did not stay them from their purpose, and the gate window went dark, and the light of the moon was blocked, and there was the sound of mighty wings, but the men did not see it, as they were intent on their ravishment. Folk of Dimpton in their beds that night dreamed of hoots and screeches and howls, and of great birds, and they dreamed that they were become little mice and rats. On the morrow, when the sun was high, the good wives of the town went through Diamond a hunting high and low for their husbands and their sons, which, coming to the convent, they found on the cellar stones the pellets of owls, and in the pellets they discovered hair and buckles and coins and small bones, and also a quantity of straw upon the floor. The man of Dimpton was none of them seen again. However, for some years thereafter, some said they saw ye made in high places, like the highest oak trees and steeples, and this being always in the dusk and at night, and no one could rightly swear if it were her or no. It was a white figure, but Mr. E. Wild could not remember him rightly, whether folk said that she wore clothes or was naked. The truth of it I know not, but it is a merry tale, and one which I write down here. Revenge. Such a merry tale. What's up, Milk? What's up, Milk? Yeah, some of these are quite Monka-esque. I quite enjoy them. I quite enjoy Neil Gaiman's style of writing and storytelling. Honest. I think we still have the poll going. I do it? Yes, that's how I do it. It's still going. Standing is, I think it's still Stormlight Archives. Next short story is Nuggets, Old Peculiar. Benjamin Lasseter was coming to the unavoidable conclusion that the woman who had written a walking tour of the British coastline, the book he was carrying in his backpack, had never been on a walking tour of any kind, and would probably not recognize the British coastline if it were to dance through her bedroom at the head of a marching band, singing, "I'm the British coastline," in a loud and cheerful voice while accompanying itself on the kazoo. He had been following her advice for 5 days now, and had little to show for it except blisters and a headache and a backache. All British seaside resorts contain a number of bed and breakfast establishments, who will be only too delighted to put you up in the off-season, was one such piece of advice. Ben had crossed it out and written in the margin beside it, all British seaside resorts contain a handful of bed and breakfast establishments, the owners of which take off to Spain or Provence or somewhere on the last day of September, locking the doors behind them as they go. He added a number of the other marginal notes too, such as "Do not repeat, not under any circumstances, order fried eggs again in any roadside cafe," and "What is it with the fish and chips thing?" and "No, they are not." That last was written beside a paragraph which claimed that if there was one thing that the inhabitants of scenic villages on the British coastline were pleased to see, it was a young American tourist on a walking tour. For 5 hellish days, Ben had walked from village to village, had drunk sweet tea and instant coffee in cafeterias and cafes, and stared out at the grey rocky vistas and at the slate-colored sea, shivered under his too thick sweaters, got wet, and failed to see any of the sights that were promised. Sitting in the bus shelter in which he had unrolled his sleeping bag one night, he had begun to translate key descriptive words. Charming, he decided, meant nondescript. Scenic meant ugly, but with a nice view if the rain never lets up. Delightful probably meant we've never been here and don't know anyone who has. He had also come to the conclusion that the more exotic the name of the village, the duller the village. Thus, it was that Ben Lester came, on the 5th day, somewhere north of Bootle, to the village of Innsmouth, which was rated neither charming, scenic, nor delightful in his guidebook. There were no descriptions of the rusting pier, nor the mounds of rotting lobster pots upon the pebbly beach. On the seafront were 3 bed and breakfasts, next to each other, Seaview, Mon Repos, and Shab Niggurath, each with a neon vacancy sign turned off in the window of the front parlour, each with a closed for the season notice thumbtacked to the front door. There were no cafes open on the seafront. The lone fish and chip shop had a closed sign up. Ben waited outside for it to open as the grey afternoon light faded into dusk. Finally, a small, slightly frog-faced woman came down the road and she unlocked the door of the shop. Ben asked her when they would be open for business, and she looked at him, puzzled, and said, "It's Monday, dear. We're never open on Monday." Then she went into the fish and chip shop and locked the door behind her, leaving Ben cold and hungry on her doorstep. Ben had been raised in a dry town in northern Texas. The only water was in backyard swimming pools, and the only way to travel was in an air-conditioned pickup truck. So the idea of walking by the sea in a country where they spoke English of a sort had appealed to him. Ben's hometown was double dry. It prided itself on having banned alcohol 30 years before the rest of America leapt onto the prohibition bandwagon, and on never having got off again. Thus all Ben knew of pubs was that they were sinful places, like bars, only with cuter names. The author of a walking tour of the British coastline had, however, suggested that pubs were good places to go find local colour and local information, that one should always stand one's round, and that some of them sold food. Innsmouth pub was called the Book of Dead Names, and the sign over the door informed Ben that the proprietor was one A. Al-Hazred, licensed to sell wines and spirits. Ben wondered if this meant that they would serve Indian food, which he had eaten on his arrival in Bootle and rather enjoyed. He paused at the signs directing him to the public bar or the saloon bar, which British public bars were private like their public schools, and eventually wondering if British public bars were private like their public schools, and eventually, because it sounded more like something you would find in a western, going into the saloon bar. The saloon bar was almost empty. Its It smelled like last week's spilled beer and the day before yesterday's cigarette smoke. In the bar was a plump woman with bottle blonde hair. Sitting in one corner were a couple of gentlemen wearing long grey raincoats and scarves. They were playing dominoes and sipping dark brown foam-topped beerish drinks from dimpled glass tankards. Then walked over to the bar. You sell food here? Barmaid scratched the side of her nose for a moment and then admitted grudgingly that she could probably do him a plowman's. Ben had no idea what this meant and found himself for the 100th time wishing that a walking tour of the British coastline had an American English phrasebook in the back. Is that food? He asked. She nodded. Okay, I will have one of those. And to drink. Coke, please. We haven't got any Coke. Pepsi then. No Pepsi? Well, what do you have? Sprite? 7-Up? Gatorade? She looked blanker than previously. Then she said, I think there's a bottle or two of cherryade in the back. That will be fine. It'll be £5 and 20 pence, and I will bring you over your plums when it's ready. Ben decided as he sat at the small and slightly sticky wooden table, drinking something fizzy that both looked and tasted a bright chemical red, that the plums was probably a steak of some kind. He reached this conclusion, colored. He knew of some. Wait. He reached this conclusion, colored, he knew, by wishful thinking, from imagining rustic, possibly even bucolic plowmen leading their plump oxen through fresh ploughed fields at sunset, and because he could, by then, with equanimity and only a little help from others, have eaten an entire ox. Here you go, ploughman's, said the barmaid, putting a plate down in front of him. That a ploughman's turned out to be a rectangular slab of sharp-tasting cheese, a lettuce leaf, an undersized tomato with a thumbprint in it, a mound of something wet and brown that tastes like sour jam, and a small, hard, stale roll came as a sad disappointment to Ben, who had already decided that the British treated food as some kind of punishment. He chewed the cheese and the lettuce leaf and cursed every ploughman in England for choosing to dine upon such swill. Gentlemen in grey raincoats, who had been sitting in the corner, finished their game of dominoes, picked up their drinks, and came and sat beside Ben. What you drinking? One of them asked, curiously. It's cold cherryade, he told them. It tastes like something from a chemical factory. Interesting you should say that, said the shorter of the two. Interesting you should say that, because I had a friend who worked in a chemical factory, and he never drank cherryade. He paused dramatically, and then took a sip of his brown drink. Ben waited for him to go on, but that appeared to be that. The conversation had stopped. In an effort to appear polite, Ben asked in his turn, So what are you guys drinking? The taller of the two strangers, who had been looking lugubrious, brightened up. Why, that's exceedingly kind of you. Pint of Shoggott's Old Peculiar for me, please. And for me too, said his friend. I could murder Sloggott's ear. I bet that would make a good advertising slogan. I could murder Sloggott's. I should write them and suggest it. I bet they would be very, very glad of me suggesting. Then bent over to the barmaid, planning to ask her for 2 pints of Shoggott's Old Peculiar and a glass of water for himself, only to find she had already poured 3 pints of the dark beer. Well, he thought, might as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb, and he was certain it couldn't be worse than the cherryade. He took a sip. The beer had some kind of flavor which he suspected advertisers would describe as full-bodied, although if pressed they would have to admit that the body in question had been that of a goat's. He paid the barmaid and maneuvered his way back to his new friends. So, what you doing in Innsmouth? Asked the taller of the two. I suppose you are one of our American cousins, come to see the most famous of English villages. They named the one in America after this one, you know, said the smaller one. Is there an Innsmouth in the States? Asked Ben. I should say so, said the smaller man. He wrote about it all the time, him whose name we don't mention. I'm sorry, said Ben. The little man looked over his shoulder, then he hissed very loudly, H.P. Lovecraft. I told you not to mention that name, said his friend, and he took a sip of the dark brown beer. H.P. Lovecraft, H.P. bloody Lovecraft, H. bloody P. bloody love bloody craft. He stopped to take a breath. What did he know? I mean, what did he bloody know? Ben sipped his beer. The name was vaguely familiar. He remembered it from rummaging through the pile of old-style vinyl LPs at the back of his father's garage. Weren't they a rock group? I wasn't talking about any rock group. I mean the writer. I never heard of him, he admitted. I really mostly only read westerns and technical manuals. The little man nudged his neighbor. Here, Wilf. You hear that? He's never heard of him. Well, there's no harm in that. I used to read that Zane Grey, said the taller. Yes, well, that's nothing to be proud of. This bloke. What did you say your name was? Ben. Ben Lassiter. You are? The little man smiled. He looked awfully like a frog, though. Thought Ben. I'm set, he said. My friend here is called Wolf. Charmed, said Wolf. Hi, said Ben. Frankly, said the little man. I agree with you. You do? Said Ben, perplexed. The little man nodded. Yeah. H.P. Lovecraft. I don't know what the fuss is about. He couldn't bloody write. He slurred his stout, then licked the foam from his lips with a long and flexible tongue. I mean, for starters, you look at them words he used, eldritch. You know what eldritch means. Ben shook his head. He seemed to be discussing literature with two strangers in an English pub while drinking beer. He wondered for a moment if he had become someone else while he wasn't looking. The beer tasted less bad. The further down the glass he went, and was beginning to erase the lingering aftertaste of the chariot. Eldritch means weird, peculiar, bloody odd. That's what it means. I looked it up in a dictionary. And gibbous? Ben shook his head again. Gibbous means the moon was nearly full. And what about that one he was always calling us, Tang? What's name? Starts with a B. Tip of the tongue. Tip of me tongue. Bastards, suggested Wilf. Nah, thing you know. Batrachian? That's it. Means look like frogs. Hang on, said Wilf. I thought they was like a kind of camel. That shook his head vigorously. It's definitely frogs. Not camels, frogs. Will slurped his shuggets. Ben sipped his carefully, without pleasure. So, said Ben. They've got two humps, interjected Wilf, the tall one. Frogs? Asked Ben. Nah, batrachians. Whereas your average dromedary camel, he's only got one. It's for the long journey through the desert. That's what they eat. Frogs? Asked Ben. Camel humps. Will fixed Ben with one bulging yellow eye. You listen to me, matey, me lad. After you've been out in some trackless desert for 3 or 4 weeks, a plate of roasted camel hump starts looking particularly tasty. That looked scornful. You've never eaten a camel hump. Might have done, said Wilf. Yes, but you haven't. You've never even been in the desert. Well, let's say, just supposing, I'd been on a pilgrimage to the tomb of Nyarlathotep, Black King of the Ancients, who shall come in the night from the east, and you shall not know him, you mean? Oh, of course, that's who I mean. Just checking. Stupid question if you ask me. You could have meant someone else with the same name. Well, it's not exactly a common name, is it? Nyarlathotep. There's not exactly going to be 2 of them, are there? Hello, my name's Nyarlathotep. What a coincidence meeting you here. Funny them being 2 of us. I don't exactly think so. Anyway, so I'm trudging through them trackless wastes, thinking to myself, I could murder a camel hump. But you haven't, have you? You've never even been out of Innsmouth Harbor. Well, no. There. Seth looked at Ben triumphantly. Then he leaned over and whispered into Ben's ear. He gets like this when he gets a few drinks into him, I'm afraid. I heard that, said Wolf. Good, said Seth. Anyway, H.P. Lovecraft, he'd write one of his bloody sentences. The gibbous moon hung low over the eldritch and batrachian inhabitants of squamous Dulwich. What does he mean, eh? What does he mean? I will tell you what he bloody means. What he bloody means is that the moon was nearly full and everybody that lived in Dulwich was bloody peculiar frogs. That's what he means. What about the other thing you said? Asked Wilf. What? Squamous? What's it mean then? Give me 2 seconds. Squamous? What's it mean then? Seth shrugged. Haven't a clue, he admitted. But I used it an awful lot. There was another pause. I'm a student, said Ben. Gonna be a metallurgist. Somehow he had managed to finish the whole of his first pint of Shoggott's Old Peculiar, which was, he realized, pleasantly shocked, his first alcoholic beverage. What do you guys do? We, said Wilf, are acolytes. Of great Cthulhu, said Seth proudly. Yeah, said Ben. And what exactly does that involve? I shout, and said Wilf. Hang on. Wilf went over to the barmaid and came back with 3 more pints. Well, he said, what it involves is, technically speaking, not a lot right now. The acolyting is not really what you might call laborious employment in the middle of its busy season. That is, of course, because of his being asleep. Well, not exactly asleep, more like, if you want to put a finger point on it, dead. In his house at Sunken Relia. That Cthulhu lies dreaming, interjected Seth. Or as the poet has it, that is not dead what can eternal lie. But in strange eons, chanted Wilf, and by strange he means bloody peculiar. Exactly. You're not talking your normal eons here at all, but in strange eons even death can die. Ben was mildly surprised to find that he seemed to be drinking another full-bodied pint of Shoggott's Old Peculiar. Somehow, the taste of rank goat was less offensive on the second pint. He was also delighted to notice that he was no longer hungry, that his blistered feet had stopped hurting, and that his companions were charming, intelligent men whose names he was having difficulty in keeping apart. He did not have enough experience with alcohol to know that this was one of the symptoms of being on your second pint of Shoggott's Old Peculiar. So, right now, said Seth, or possibly Wilf, the business is a bit light, mostly consisting of waiting. And praying, said Wilf, if he wasn't Seth. And praying, but pretty soon now that's all going to change. Yeah? Asked Ben. How's that? Well, confided the taller one. Any day now, great Cthulhu, currently impermanently deceased, who is our boss, will wake up in his undersea living sort of quarters. And then, said the shorter one, he will stretch and yawn and get dressed. Probably go to the toilet. I wouldn't at all be surprised. Maybe read the papers. And having done all that, he will come out of the ocean depths and consume the world utterly. And found this unspeakably funny. Like a plowman's, he said. Exactly. Well put. The young American gentleman. Great Cthulhu will gobble the world up like a plowman's lunch, leaving but only the lump of Branston's pickle on the side of the plate. That's the brown stuff? Asked Ben. They assured him that it was, and he went up to the bar and brought them back another 3 pints of Shoggott's Old Peculiar. He could not remember much of the conversation that followed. He remembered finishing his pint, and his new friends inviting him on a walking tour of the village, pointing out the various sights to him. That's where we rent our videos, and that building next door is the nameless temple of unspeakable gods. And on Saturday mornings there's a jumble sale in the crypt. He explained to them his theory of the walking tour book and told them emotionally that Innsmouth was both scenic and charming. He told them that they were the best friends he had ever had and that Innsmouth was delightful. The moon was nearly full, and in the pale moonlight both of his new friends did look remarkably like huge frogs, or possibly camels. The 3 of them walked to the end of the rusted pier, and Seth and or Wilf pointed out to Ben the ruins of Sunken Relia, in the bay, visible in the moonlight beneath the sea. And Ben was overcome by what he kept explaining was a sudden and unforeseen attack of seasickness, and was violently and unendingly sick over the metal railings into the Black Sea below. After that, it all got a bit odd. Van Lasseter awoke on the cold hillside with his head pounding and a bad taste in his mouth. His head was resting on his backpack. There was rocky moorland on each side of him, and no sign of a road, and no sign of any village, scenic, charming, delightful, or even picturesque. He stumbled and limped almost a mile to the nearest road and walked along it until he reached the petrol station. They told him that there was no village anywhere locally named Innsmouth, no village with a pub called the Book of Dead Names. He told them about two men named Wilf and Seth, and a friend of theirs called Strange Ian was fast asleep somewhere, if he wasn't dead under the sea. They told him that they didn't think much of American hippies who wandered about the countryside taking drugs, and that he'd probably feel better after a nice cup of tea and a tuna and cucumber sandwich. But that if he was dead set on wandering the countryside taking drugs, young Ernie, who worked the afternoon shift, would be all too happy to sell him a nice little bag of homegrown cannabis, if he could come back after lunch. Ben pulled out his A Walking Tour of British Coastline book and tried to find Innsmouth in it to prove to them that he had not dreamt it, but he was unable to locate the page it had been on, if ever it had been there at all. Most of one page, however, had been ripped out, roughly about halfway through the book. And then Ben telephoned a taxi, which took him to Bootle railway station, where he caught a train, which took him to Manchester, where he got on an airplane, which took him to Chicago, where he changed planes and flew to Dallas, where he got another plane going north, and he rented a car and went home. Found the knowledge that he was over 600 miles away from the ocean very comforting, although later in life he moved to Nebraska to increase the distance from the sea. There were things he had seen, or thought he had seen, beneath the old pier that night that he would never be able to get out of his head. There were things that lurked beneath grey raincoats that man was not meant to know. Squamous. He did not need to look it up. He knew they were squamous. A couple of weeks after his return home, Ben posted his annotated copy of A Walking Tour of the British Coastline to the author, care of her publisher, with an extensive letter containing a number of helpful suggestions for future editions. The author should send him a copy of the page that had been ripped from his guidebook to set his mind at rest, but he was secretly relieved as the days turned into months, and the months turned into years, and then into decades. He replied, yes, Shoggoth's old peculiar. Pay ticket to seeing some eldritch horrors. On that note, I do have the Necronomicon as well, if you ever want to read that. The big racist book of horrors. As in racist because of H.P. Lovecraft, obviously. He was said to be extremely racist even for his time. Well, the age he lived in. Which is quite an accomplishment, if you ask me. Nice sip of your teas. Nice, cozy, and chill. We'll continue on with the next short story, which is titled Virus. There was a computer game. I was given it. One of my friends gave it to me. He was playing it. He said it's brilliant. You should play it. And I did, and it was. I copied it off the disk he gave me. For anyone, I wanted everyone to play it. Everyone should have this much fun. I sent it upline to bulletin boards, but mainly I got it out to all my friends. Personal contact, that's the way it was given to me. My friends were like me. Some were scared of viruses. Someone gave you a game on disk next week or Friday the 13th. It reformatted your hard disk or corrupted your memory. But this one never did that. This was that safe. Even my friends who didn't like computers started to play. As you get better, the game gets harder. Maybe you never win, but you can get pretty good. I'm pretty good. Of course I have to spend a lot of time playing it. So do my friends, and their friends. And just the people you meet. You can see them walking down the old motorways, or standing in queues away from their computers, away from the arcades that sprang up overnight, but they play it in their heads in the meantime, combining shapes, puzzling over contours, putting colors next to colors, twisting signals to new screen selections, listening to the music. Sure, people think about it, but mainly they play it. My record's 18 hours at a stretch, 4,012 points, 3 fanfares. Play through the tears, the aching wrist, the hunger. After a while, it all goes away. All of it except game, I should say. There's no room in my mind anymore, no room for other things. We copied the game, gave it to our friends. It transcends language, occupies our time. Sometimes I think I'm forgetting things these days. I wonder what happened to the TV. There used to be TV. I wonder what will happen when I run out of canned food. I wonder where all the people went. And then I realized how, if I'm fast enough, I can put a black square next to a red line, mirror it, and rotate them so they both disappear, clearing the left block. For a while, for a wide bubble to rise. So they both disappear. And when the power goes off for good, then I will play it in my head until I die. That's a really cute emote, Malk. I really appreciate it, and I'm sorry that the bot has borked it. Yeah, it was, this one was more like a little poem about a game that doesn't have any viruses, but it itself is the virus, and it gets everyone hard addicted until they forget about everything but the game. Yes. Oh, there's a smaller version of it as well. Cute. Like it. I like that emote. It's nice. I feel like I'm gonna stop with that one. It's a short 1 hour stream. Halo Blast, did you just arrive? Tell me, did you just arrive? I guess I can do one more. Let's do one more short story. Yeah, short stories are always a good choice. Yeah. Since Blast just arrived, we are doing one more short story. What the hell, cat? What are you doing? Yes, book club days. Soon TM is gonna be Stormlight Archives. Like, we are about halfway through the book. After this short story, we're gonna be at page 200. And it's 384 pages altogether. Yeah, at home I have a Raw Dale book that I don't have here, sadly. So next year, or whenever I got the money and time to actually go home, I will bring that book with me, because that's actually in English as well. I can read some out of that. But I'm looking forward to reading Stormlight Archive as well, because that hasn't even been on my radar before. So it's nice to jump into something that's new. I always, like, for the poll, I will always put at least one book in there that I already own, or is in my collection, just in case some of you want to read that. Felix, can you stop digging out tea from that box, please? So, yeah. Well, the last short story for today. The title is Looking for the Girl. I was 19 in 1965. In my drain pipe trousers, with my hair quietly creeping down toward my collar. Every time you turned on the radio, the Beatles were singing "Help!" And I wanted to be John Lennon, with all the girls screaming after me. Always ready, with a cynical quip. That was the year I bought my first copy of Penthouse from a small tobacconist in the King's Road. I paid my few furtive shillings and went home with it stuffed up my jumper, occasionally glancing down to see if it had burnt a hole in the fabric. The copy has long since been thrown away, but I will always remember it, sedate letters about censorship, a short story by H.E. Bates, and an interview with an American novelist I have never heard of, a fashion spread of mohair suits and paisley ties, all to be bought on Carnaby Street. Best of all, there were girls, of course. The best of all the girls, there was Charlotte. Charlotte was 19, too. All the girls in that long gone magazine seemed identical with their perfect plastic flesh, not a hair out of place. You could almost smell the liquor, smiling wholesomely at the camera while their eyes squinted at you through forest thick eyelashes. White lipstick, white teeth, white breasts, bikini bleached. I never gave a thought to the strange positions they had coyly arranged themselves into to avoid showing the slightest curl or shadow of pubic hair. I wouldn't have known what I was looking at anyway. I had eyes only for their pale bottoms and breasts, their chaste but uninviting common glances. Then I turned the page and I saw Charlotte. She was different from the others. Charlotte was sex. She wore sexuality like a translucent veil, like a heady perfume. There were words beside the pictures, and I read them in a daze. The entrancing Charlotte Reeve is 19, a resurgent individualist and beat poet, contributor to Fab magazine. Phrases stuck to my mind as I pored over the flat pictures. She posed and pouted in the Chelsea flat. The photographers, I guessed, and I knew that I needed her. She was my age. It was fate. Charlotte. Charlotte was 19. I bought Penthouse regularly after that, hoping she'd appear again. But she didn't. Not then. 6 months later, my mom found a shoebox under my bed and looked inside it. First she threw a scene, then she threw out all the magazines, finally she threw me out. The next day I got a job, and a bedsit, in Earl's Court, without all things considered too much trouble. My job, my first, was at an electrical shop off the Edgware Road. All I could do was change a plug, but in those days people could afford to get an electrician to do just that. My boss told me I could learn on the job. I lasted 3 weeks. My first job was a proper thrill changing the plug on the bedside light of an English film star who had achieved fame through his portrayal of laconic Cockney Casanovas. When I got there, he was in bed with 2 honest-to-goodness dolly birds. I changed the plug and left. It was all very proper. I didn't even catch a glimpse of nipple, let alone get invited to join them. 3 weeks later, I got fired and lost my virginity on the same day. It was a posh place in Hampstead, empty apart from the maid, a little dark-haired woman, a few years older than me. I got down on my knees to change the plug, and she climbed on a chair next to me to dust off the top of a door. I looked up. Under her skirt, she was wearing stockings and suspenders, and so help me, nothing else. I discovered what happened in the bits the pictures didn't show you. So I lost my cherry under a dining room table in Hampstead. You don't see maidservants anymore. They have gone the way of the bubble car and the dinosaur. It was afterward that I lost my job. Not even my boss, convinced as he was of my utter incompetence, believed I could have taken 3 hours to change a plug, and I wasn't about to tell him that I spent 2 of the hours I'd been gone hiding underneath the dining room table when the master and mistress of the house came home unexpectedly, was I? I got a succession of short-lived jobs after that, first as a printer, then as a typewriter, before I wound up in a little ad agency above a sandwich shop in Old Compton Street. I carried on buying Penthouse. Everybody looked like an extra in the Avengers, but they looked like that in real life. Articles on Woody Allen and Sappho's Island, Batman and Vietnam, strippers in action wielding whips, fashion and fiction, and sex. The suits gained velvet collars, and the girls messed up their hair. Fetish was fashion. London was swinging, the magazine covers were psychedelic, and if there wasn't acid in the drinking water, we acted as if there ought to have been. I saw Charlotte again in 1969, long after I'd given up on her. I thought that I had forgotten what she looked like. Then one day, the head of the agency dropped the Penthouse on my desk. There was a cigarette ad we'd placed in it that he was particularly pleased with. I was 23, a rising star running an art department, as if I knew what I was doing, and sometimes I did. I don't remember much about the issue itself. All I remember is Charlotte. Hair wild, and Tony, eyes provocative, smiling like she knew all the secrets of life, and she was keeping them close to her naked chest. Her name wasn't Charlotte then. It was Melanie, or something like that. The text said that she was 19. Was living with a dancer called Rachel at the time, in a flat in Camden Town. She was the best looking, most delightful woman I've ever known. Rachel. And I went home early with those pictures of Charlotte in my briefcase and locked myself in the bathroom and I banged myself into a daze. We broke up shortly after that, me and Rachel. The ad agency boomed. Everything in the 60s boomed. And in 1971, I was given the task of finding the face for a clothing label. They wanted a girl who would epitomize everything sexual, who would wear their clothes as if she were about to reach up and rip them off, if some man didn't get there first. And I knew the perfect girl, Charlotte. I phoned Penthouse, who didn't know what I was talking about, but reluctantly put me in touch with both of the photographers who had shot her in the past. The men at Penthouse didn't seem convinced when I told them it was the same girl each time. I got hold of the photographers, trying to find her agency. They said she didn't exist. At least not in any way you could pin down she didn't. Sure both of them knew the girl I meant. But as one of them told me, like weird, she'd come to them. They'd paid her a modeling fee and sold the pictures. No, they didn't have any dresses for her. I was 26 and a fool. I saw immediately what must be happening. Was being given the runaround. Some other ad agency had obviously signed her, was planning a big campaign around her, and had paid the photographers to keep quiet. I cursed and I shouted at them over the phone. I made outrageous financial offers. They told me to fuck off. The next month, she was in Penthouse. No longer a psychedelic tease mag. It had become classier. The girls had grown pubic hair, had man-eating glints in their eyes. Men and women roamed in soft, focus-through cornfields, pink against the gold. Her name, said the text, was Belinda. She was an antique dealer. It was Charlotte all right, although her hair was dark piled in rich ringlets over her head. The text also gave her age, 19. Phoned my contact at Penthouse and got the name of the photographer, John Felbridge. I rang him. Like the others, he claimed to know nothing about her, but by now I'd learned the lesson. Instead of shouting at him down the telephone line, I gave him a job on a fairly sizable account, shooting a small boy eating ice cream. Felbridge was long-haired, in his late 30s, with a ratty fur coat and plimsolls that were flapping open, but a good photographer. After the shoot, I took him out for a drink, and we talked about the lousy weather, and photography, and decimal currency, and his previous work, and Charlotte. So you were saying you'd seen the pictures in Penthouse, Felbridge said. I nodded. We were both slightly drunk. I will tell you about that girl. You know something? She's why I want to give up glamour work and go legit. Said her name was Belinda. How did you meet her? I'm getting to that, aren't I? I thought she was from an agency, didn't I? She knocks on the door, I think, strips, and invite her in. She said she wasn't from an agency. She says she's selling. He wrinkled his brow, confused. Isn't that odd? I've forgotten what she was selling. Maybe she wasn't selling anything. I don't know. I'll forget my own name next. Knew she was something special. Asked her if she would pose. Told her it was kosher. I wasn't just trying to get into her pants. And she agrees. Click, flash, 5 rolls, just like that. As soon as we've finished, she's got her clothes back on. Heads out the door. Pretty as you please. What about your money? I says to her. Hand it to me, she says, and she's down the steps onto the road. So, you have got her address? I asked, trying to keep the interest out of my voice. No, bugger all. Wound up setting her fee aside in case she comes back. I remember in with the disappointment, wondering whether his Cockney accent was real or merely fashionable. But what I was leading up to is this. When the pictures came back, I knew well, as far as tits and fanny went, no, as far as the whole photographing women thing went, I'd done it all. She was women, see? I'd done it. No, no, let me get you one. My shout. Bloody Mary, wasn't it? I gotta say, I'm looking forward to our future work together. There wasn't to be any future work. The agency was taken over by an older, bigger firm who wanted our account. They incorporated the initials of the firm into their own and kept on a few top copywriters, but they let the rest of us go. I went back to my flat and waited for the offers of work to pour in, which they didn't. But a girlfriend of a friend starting chatting to me late one night in a club. Music by a guy spaceman. The rest of his band were in silver cowboy outfits. I didn't even listen to the songs. The next thing you know, I was managing a rock band of my own, the Diamonds of Flame. Unless you were hanging around the London club scene in the early 70s, you will never have heard of them. Although they were a very good band. Tight, lyrical. 5 guys, 2 of them are currently in World League supergroups. One of them's a plumber in Walsall. He still sends me Christmas cards. The other 2 have been dead for 15 years, anonymous ODs. They went within a week of each other, and it broke up the band. It broke me up too. I dropped out after that. I wanted to get as far away from the city and that lifestyle as I could. I bought a small farm in Vels. I was happy there too, with the sheep and the goats and the cabbages. I'd probably be there today if it hadn't been for her and the penthouse. I don't know where it came from. One morning, I went outside to find a magazine lying in the yard, in the mud, face down. It was almost a year old. She wore no makeup and was posed in what looked like a very high-class flat. For the first time, I could see her pubic hair, or I could have if the photo hadn't been artistically fuzzed and just a fraction out of focus. She looked as if she were coming out of the mist. Her name, it said, was Leslie. She was 19. After that, I just couldn't stay away anymore. I sold the farm for a pittance and came back to London in the last days of 1976. I went on the dole, lived in a council flat in Victoria, got up at lunchtime, hit the pubs until they closed in the afternoons, read newspapers in the library until opening time, then pub crawled until closing time. I lived off my dole money and drank from my savings account. I was 30 and I felt much older. I started living with an anonymous blonde punkette from Canada. I met in a drinking club in Greek Street. She was the barmaid, and one night after closing, she told me she'd just lost her digs, so I offered her the sofa at my place. She was only 16, it turned out, and she never got to sleep on the sofa. She had small pomegranate breasts, a skull tattooed on her back, and the junior bride of a Frankenstein hairdo. She said she'd done everything and believed in nothing. She'd talk for hours about the way the world was moving toward a condition of anarchy, claimed that there was no hope and no future, but she felt like she'd just invented fucking. And I figured that was good. Come to bed wearing nothing but spiky black leather dog collar and masses of messy black eye makeup. She spat sometimes, just gobbed on the pavement when we were walking, which I hated. And she made me take her to the punk clubs to watch her gob and swear and pogo. Then I really felt old. I liked some of the music though, Peaches, stuff like that. And I saw the Sex Pistols play live. They were rotten. Then the punkette walked out on me, claiming that I was a boring old fart, and she took up with an extremely plump Arab princeling. Thought you didn't believe in anything, I called after her, as she climbed onto the roller he sent to collect her. I believe in 100 quid blowjobs and Ming's sheets, she called back, one hand playing with the strand of her Bride of Frankenstein hairdo. And a gold vibrator. I believe in that. So she went away to an oil fortune and a new wardrobe, and I checked my savings and found I was dead broke, practically penniless, but still sporadically buying penthouse. My 60s soul was both deeply shocked and profoundly thrilled by the amount of flesh now on you. Nothing was left to the imagination, which, at the same time, attracted and repelled me. Then, near the end of 1977, she was there again. Her hair was multicolored, my Charlotte, and her mouth was as crimson as if she'd been eating raspberries. She lay on satin sheets, with a jeweled mask on her face, and a hand between her legs. Ecstatic, orgasmic, all I ever wanted. Charlotte. She was appearing under the name of Titania, and was draped with peacock feathers. she worked, I was informed, by the insectile black birds that scrapped around her photographs in an estate agent's in the south. She liked sensitive, honest men. She was 19. And god damn it, she looked 19. And I was broke, on the dole with just over 1,000,000 others and going nowhere. I sold my record collection and my books, all but for 4 copies of Penthouse and most of the furniture, and I bought myself a fairly good camera. But I phoned all the photographers I'd known when I was in advertising almost a decade before. Most of them didn't remember me, or they said they didn't. And those that didn't want an eager young assistant who wasn't young anymore and had no experience. But I kept trying, and eventually got hold of Harry Bleak, a silver-haired old boy with his own studios in Crouch End, and a posse of expensive little boyfriends. I told him that what I wanted. He didn't even stop to think about it. Be here in 2 hours. No catches? 2 hours, no more. It was there. For the first year, I cleaned up the studio, painted backdrops, and went out to the local shops and streets to beg, buy, or borrow appropriate props. Next year, he let me help with the lights, set up shots, bath smoke pellets and dry ice around, and make the tea. I'm exaggerating, I only made the tea once. I make terrible tea. But I learned a hell of a lot about photography. And suddenly, it was 1981, and the world was newly romantic, and I was 35 and feeling every minute of it. Bleak told me to look after the studio for a few weeks while he went off to Morocco for a month of well-earned debauchery. It was in Penthouse that month, more coy and prim than before, waiting for me neatly between advertisements for stereos and scotch. She was called Dawn, but she was still my Charlotte, with nipples like beads of blood on her tan breasts, dark fuzzy touch between forever legs, shot on location on a beach somewhere. She was only 19, said the text. Charlotte. Harry Bleak was killed traveling back from Morocco. A bus fell on him. It's not funny, really. He was in a car ferry coming back from Calais, and he snuck down into the car hold to get his cigars, which he'd left in the glove compartment of the Mercedes. Weather was rough, and the tourist bus belonging I read in the papers and was told at length by a tearful boyfriend to a shopping co-op in Wigan hadn't been chained down properly. Harry was crushed against the side of his silver Mercedes. It always kept the car spotless. When the will was read, I discovered that the old bastard had left me his studio. I cried myself to sleep that night, got stinking drunk for a week, and then opened for business. Things happened between then and now. I got married. It lasted 3 weeks. Then we called it a day. I guess I'm not the marrying type. I got beaten up by a drunken Glaswegian on the train late one night, and the other passengers pretended it wasn't happening. I bought a couple of terrapins and a tank, put them in the flat over the studio, and called them Rodney and Kevin. Became a fairly good photographer. I did calendars, advertising, fashion, and glamour work. Little kids and big stars. The works. And one spring day in 1985, I met Charlotte. I was alone in the studio on a Thursday morning, unshaven and barefoot. It was a free day, and I was going to spend it cleaning the place and reading the papers. I had left the studio doors open, letting the fresh air in to replace the stink of cigarettes and spilled wine of the shoe the night before, when a woman's voice said, "Bleak photographic?" "That's right," I said, not turning around. "But Bleak's dead. I run the place now." "I want to model for you," she said. I turned around. She was about 5'6", with honey-colored hair, olive green eyes, and a smile like cold water in the desert. "Charlotte," tilted her head to one side. "If you like, do you want to take my picture?" I nodded dumbly, plugged in the umbrellas, stood her up against the bare brick wall, and shot a couple of test Polaroids. No special makeup, no set, just a few lights, a Hasselblad, and the most beautiful girl in my world. After a while, she began to take off her clothes. I did not ask her to. I don't remember saying anything to her. She undressed, and I carried on taking photographs. She knew it all. how to pose, to preen, to stare. Silently, she flirted with the camera, and with me standing behind it, moving around her, clicking away. I don't remember stopping for anything. I must have changed films because I wound up with a dozen rolls at the end of the day. I suppose you think that after the pictures were taken, I made love with her. Now, I would be a liar if I said I've never screwed models in my time, and for that matter, some of them have screwed me. But I didn't touch her. She was my dream, and if you touch a dream, it vanishes, like a soap bubble. And anyway, I simply couldn't touch her. How old are you? I asked her just before she left, when she was pulling on her coat and picking up her bag. 19, she told me without looking around, and then she was out the door. Didn't say goodbye. I sent the photos to Penthouse. Couldn't think of anywhere else to send them. 2 days later, I got a call from the art editor. Love the girl. Real face of the 80s stuff. What are her vital statistics? Her name is Charlotte, I told him. She's 19. And now I'm 39, and one day I will be 50, and she will still be 19. But someone else will be taking the photographs. Rachel, my dancer, married an architect. The blonde pankette from Canada runs a multinational fashion chain. I do some photographic work for her from time to time. Her hair is cut short, and there's a smudge of grey in it, and she's a lesbian these days. She told me she's still got the Ming sheets, but she made up the bit about the gold vibrator. My ex-wife married a nice bloke. He owns 2 video rental shops, and they moved to Slough. They have twin boys. I don't know what happened to the maid. Charlotte. In Greece, the philosophers are debating. Socrates is drinking hemlock, and she is posing for sculptures of Erato, muse of light, poetry, and lovers, and she's 19. In Crete, she's oiling her breasts and she's jumping bulls in the ring while King Minos applauds, and someone's painting her likeness on a wine jar, and she's 19. In 2065, she's stretched out on the revolving floor of a holographic photographer, who records her as an erotic dream in living sensual love, imprisons the sight and sound of the very smell of her in a tiny diamond matrix. She's only 19. And a caveman outlines Charlotte with a burned stick on the wall of the temple cave, filling in the shape and the texture of her with earths and buried eyes. 19. Charlotte is there, in all places, all times, sliding through our fantasies, a girl forever. I want her so much it makes me hurt sometimes. That's when I take down the photographs of her and just look at them for a while, wondering why I didn't try to touch her, why I wouldn't really even speak to her when she was there, never coming up with an answer that I could understand. That's why I've written this all down, I suppose. This morning, I noticed yet another grey hair at my temple. Charlotte is 19, somewhere. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this Sunday's book club. Not sure where I'm gonna send you off to. 19, yeah, Blast 19. Everyone in the chat is 19. Okay, now that we are chill and we had our tea and had our short stories and are ready for bed, let's send Spire, if I can write her name, fucking hell, some love and some of the chill that we gathered in the past hour and a half, because she's playing Guild Wars 2 PvP, which is not the chillest of them all, let's just say that. So I am not sure if I'm gonna be streaming tomorrow just yet. I am definitely gonna be here on Tuesday, so see you guys next time. Yes, Spire is playing PvP, indeed. Yeah, we are gonna check that shit out. Yeah, thank you for joining, thank you for staying here, and see you guys later. Bye-bye.